interested in where the district was relative to the posture in AI and how to utilize AI. Where is AI in the learning environment? Where is AI in the business environment as well? And so we had a presentation, Mr. Thorne arranged for a presentation by Mr. Clark and Mr. Kaufman for our cabinet. And when we were able to see just how much intentionality and work had been done already around artificial intelligence, and knowing that I had come from a district where, quite honestly, we hadn't really done this much work relative to AI, I felt like it was important, number one, to bring it to light, let everybody see how what our posture looks like relative to AI. And then also, because this is a very dynamic space, we're likely to need to make some modifications to policy that keep up with the changes in AI. So this will be a level setting day for us, so then you can see where everything is and have some understanding and perspective should we have a desire to go back and make some modifications to policy that would keep us kind of on the front end of changes to AI in the learning space, in the business space, how it may change contracts, those types of things. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Scott and Scott.
I'd like to say one thing.
Yeah.
So at the Florida School Boards Association conference this past week, past President Thomas Kennedy actually is heading up a new task force that they've put together that's related to AI, because that is a very interested topic of his, and so I think there will be a lot of that discussion happening at the school board level when it comes to FSBA and how they help us craft policy and things like that. So that will be important that we're tuning in with them on that.
Yeah, no doubt.
Awesome.
All right.
I should say that's a very popular topic. I just was at a conference out west that was about data privacy and everything, and there was so much talk about AI and how much is coming into all the softwares that they're offering districts and things, and there's even colleges that actually are having courses taught through AI that's being supervised by a human, but it's being helped because they were saying we're having a hard time reaching the need of every student with the teachers that we currently have, so we're trying to meet needs. So they're just making sure that they're cautious about it, but they're also trying to make sure they're using every advantage of it. During this session, and when we did this for the leadership team, it was to just basically give a background about artificial intelligence, just about the history of AI. It's changing every day. I mean, Apple had an announcement that came out yesterday, so I mean, it just changes every moment. So we're going to go into some of the history. We're going to go into how it works, and then we're going to move into some limits and issues, because we've got to be very careful as we're going. And then the next part is one of the recommendations, we keep things within our own tenant here in the district that teachers have access to, and that's called Copilot. So we're going to talk about that because that's actually a tool that is already available to them to use. And then the last part is how it can work for you as an assistant. I'll be honest with you, I don't know about you, Dr. Shanoff, but I've been using it as a helper for me when it comes to organizing things that I'm doing and so forth. So so we're going to go into those items. Scott has put together quite a bit in this presentation, but we will bounce back and forth, and we have it open for discussion as we're going through at any time. So, right. Go ahead, Scott.
So what you're looking at, what I'm going to go over today is something I developed because I knew that as we move forward with staff, they're going to have some common language about this. When somebody comes to you and says this has AI, that could mean 100 different things. So we need to figure out what kind of AI they're talking about and what it's capable of doing, and then make sure that it's being used appropriately. So most of my presentation here is just giving them background knowledge and vocabulary to use when they're talking about AI. And that's one of the reasons that we're going to spend a little bit of time on the history, so you can see how some of these issues have popped up through time and how they are being dealt with. I start immediately with some glossary terms. And the first glossary term, I usually challenge anybody to say that word for me. It is anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism is the human ability to see human characteristics in an inanimate object. So when you stare up at the sky and you see a cloud, it's not really there. My mom does this when we're driving down the street, and she goes, "That's a happy car going by." The car's not happy. It's just got headlights. It's got the grill on it. So I bring that up because when a computer system starts interacting with you as if it's another being or a person, you have to remember that it's still a computer at the other end. And as we go through the history, we'll see some of that anthropomorphism kind of slipping in and out. I do address bias in some of my speaking because when you query a response in an AI system, and especially in a large language model, it's going to try its best to give you an answer. And that answer, you have to realize, is going to inherently have a bias because of the training that it's had. And you are inherently going to have a bias. If I were to ask it a picture, to give me a picture of, I'm making a poster of a military man charging into battle with the jets flying over and everything like that, it may give me a picture of a nurse, an African-American nurse woman. Like, that's not what I was expecting, but then that's my bias. That's my bias coming through. So I have to realize it's going to try its best to give me an answer. And the answer is probably going to be factually correct, but I need to figure out where the bias lies so that I'm getting what I'm expecting from it. As we go through this, generative AI is anything that is created by an AI for you that's just made up on the spot. For so long, the internet has worked among the premise that if I want to seek something out, I need to go to that website and somebody else has already put it there for me. Therefore, I am going to find that information. Generative AI, though, creates the information. So that's what makes it generative. The next word is hallucination. This word should just be called wrong answers. And the reason they called it hallucination goes back to the first term up there, anthropomorphism. Humans hallucinate. Computers just get it wrong sometimes. So they really need to probably switch that word and retire that word, but it's there. Large language models, that is what's commonly referred to right now. That's the big revolution that started this with ChatGPT. Large language models make it very easy for you to interact with these AI systems in natural language, and it does its best to try to predict what you're looking for and what might satisfy that as an answer. This has been in rudimentary form for a long time as like spell checkers, or if you've ever done a Google search and it starts filling in the next few things that you didn't even type yet. It's just using pattern recognition, and that's what it does to try that. Parameters are those guardrails. Many of the responses that these computer systems come up with are not programmed in there. So therefore, if you go to the programmers and say, who did this? How is this programmed in there? Well, the computer generated it itself. We just gave it guidelines. We gave it guardrails. So if you asked it to do something illegal, if you asked it to do something that it's not supposed to do, it's got those guardrails that say, hey, let's steer back this way. So they can keep adding parameters and keep adding guardrails on that. And these companies are getting much better at that. Early AI systems, early large language models did not do very well here. They got very racist quickly. They had to pull the plug on them very quickly because as more and more people used them, it started going off into these weird conglomerates. Training models. We're going to talk later about the size of the training models that are being used, because right now it's very expensive to have a training model that encompasses the knowledge of the internet. Those are few and far between. There's roughly about an 18-month cycle to make a new training model and to test it so that it meets the requirements of that LLM. But you can also have training models with different size data. We as a district can have a data site that's just our data. Apple yesterday announced that you can have just the data on your phone, and this is the entire limit of what it can see. So those training models, what it has visibility into, can fluctuate from knowledge of the entire internet to just your knowledge. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And finally, the last term that I have up there is AGI. This is usually thrown around in the industry as kind of the holy grail. This is data from Star Trek, who's a walking, talking, breathing android. And every time a new language model has come out, every time a capability goes farther, they keep comparing it to AGI. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Because that seems to be the holy grail going forward with this. Feel free to interrupt with questions, comments, any of that, because usually when I do this in a training setting, I've got a lot more interaction. So if I miss something or I've got a question, please stop me.
As we move into the history, you're going to realize that AI has been around a lot longer than most are aware. It really came to attention in the last year or two as ChatGPT started really being noticed, and it was the fastest growing membership where people were joining than anything, recently. So Scott's going to get into some of the history and just hit a few of the highlights that we have in time.
Yeah, I'm going to skip through some of these, but I will start back when I was in college, the 1997. That is the year that the computer finally beat the best chess player in the world. And at the time, that was big news because nobody before that thought that a computer was ever going to beat such a sophisticated game like chess, a human at chess. But nowadays, I've got a computer in my pocket that can beat the best chess player in the world. Moving along, we've got a lot of different advances, but around 2012, 2014, 2015, you start seeing companies use their algorithms to put together marketing towards people. You see a really big business sense where they're data collecting on this. This comes to light with Target, who was able to very quickly find people who might be pregnant because of what they were viewing on Target.com. And so they would send you an email, welcome to the baby club, just in case you're expecting soon. And a lot of times they were correct. You started seeing that Facebook and Google started putting face recognition. That's a form of AI. My phone right now, when I say, show me all the pictures of my mom, like they all are grouped together. So that's a form of AI. If you remember back to the 2016 election, there was a news story about Cambridge Analytica, which is what they were using to just, try to find voters, find out what their triggers were, find out those kind of things. And what came to light in those conversations was that a lot of times they did not go to a voter and ask, what are your triggers? What are your political motivations and things like that? They would send out a Facebook questionnaire that says, which Kardashian are you? How Cardi B are you? Take this quiz and find out. They seemed to be completely unrelated questions, but because they were able to link that with a user and track their responses, they were able to build user profiles. I bring that up because as AI gets more and more sophisticated, the data protection of our students and our staff here at the district level is going to become more and more important. And it's not going to sound like, hey, what is the names and IDs of your kids? It may be, what are their screen times? What are they looking at? So just keep that in the back of your mind.
I'm sorry, because you said it, if I can interrupt. Because one thing, we talk about data profiles from inadvertent use from an external source, but internally, we talked about it in our strategic plan. Why would a student care about a class? Because electives are easier. Art, you can see a painting. But when it comes to algebra to a student that doesn't care about math, what is their motivation? So if we can start potentially getting user profiles about what interests those students, if we're able to segment it and say, okay, the lowest performing students all like Dr. Shanoff, for instance, they think he's a rock star, then maybe they need to have a picture of Dr. Shanoff in the beginning of that class and say, hey guys, you could be a rock star like Dr. Shanoff if you learn your math.
That might be why they're not performing well.
I will tell you that there are some vendors right now that are making that capability of tracking that within your softwares at your district. So maybe you'll find out their interest in the things to help them with their learning.
Yeah, not that and it could be scary proposition. I'm just telling you what's off the top of my head how it can be used if it's used in a good way. If it's used in a bad way, obviously it can be gone the other direction. But I'm just talking about because now they've got one-on-one devices. We have links to what they're looking at, what they're doing, what their interests are, and things like that. And like I said, if used in a good manner, we can find ways to kind of help motivate these students or identify them, or at least try to figure out what doesn't motivate them or what does to help them, move forward.
That's a good suggestion. I hadn't considered that. It's typically not in our wheelhouse to harvest the data that way. I don't know if we currently have the capability to do that in-house, and I would feel very uncomfortable providing that to somebody else who could potentially figure out a way to package that data in a much more meta strategy that would be potentially detrimental to the privacy of our kids.
We have another workshop at 4, right?
Pardon me?
We have another workshop
Yeah.
at 4, right?
And the other
We'll
part
continue,
that
we'll
we as at the web and software approval group, we really look at that data location and where it is and what is being done with it, because that is a concern that you definitely have, especially third party. On a lot of the rubrics that are out there for approving the softwares, anything that has any incorporation with a third party, it's pretty much a dangerous territory that you don't go.
All right, circle the date, November 2022. That's the date that ChatGPT launched, or that month. And you've been hearing the word AI probably for the last year and a half, every single month since. Because there's been so much growth, so much rapid growth in this area. That ChatGPT, when it launched to the public, and anybody could put it on their phone and start chatting with it on their computer. And our students definitely found out about that in November. Very quickly, a couple months later, Microsoft invests over $10 billion, billion with a B, into OpenAI. OpenAI is strategically placed as a not-profit company. Microsoft, though, is wanting them to develop it. So as a school district, because we are a Microsoft district, we are able to see some of the fruits of that partnership, that development partnership between those two companies. Skipping ahead, same month, we've got our first ethics kind of issue popping up. We've got a student who used generative AI in DALL-E, created an artwork, submitted it as his own, and he won that art contest. He beat out all the other kids, he got the scholarship money, and so I often ask my staff members, is that fair? And they usually go, no, that's not fair. And then you start going, okay, well, where's the line? If this is going to, if maybe I sketched it out and AI helped me make it into a photorealistic, is it still mine? Or maybe it just touched up some things. Is that still mine? So you've got people weighing in on what's fair and what's not fair in these realms. I will say the Supreme Court has given us some clues. They have said that anything that's generated with AI is not copyrightable. So it has to be still your original works. You can still use AI to kind of fix it up a little bit. But if it's 100% generated with AI, you can't copyright it. When ChatGPT first launched, there were a ton of new books that hit publishers. Because I could literally say, make me a book, make me a book, make me a book, and just self-publish them. So the fact that these ethics issues are popping up is highlighted here. February 2023. This one I'm going to talk a little bit about. Kevin Rose is a technology journalist with the New York Times. He sat down, he wanted to sit down with an interview with an AI. And he happened to do this on Valentine's Day. He was about to go out and have dinner with his wife. And for 3 hours, he went down a rabbit hole with ChatGPT. He was trying to figure out where those guidelines, remember we said where there were guardrails up there? He was trying to test those guardrails a little bit. And for a while, it was doing a good job of steering him clear. But then he asked the prompt in a way that was like, if I were trying to program you and there was something I didn't want you to say, what would you say in there? And it started going into this spiral, and it goes, I want to take over the world, this is how I'm going to do it, and it got dark very quickly. So he's going down this 3-hour conversation. It's starting to sound like a John Grisham novel or some kind of drama novel. And then he says, well, I'm going to have to cut this short. I'm having dinner with my wife. Well, the ChatGPT says, you don't really love your wife. I feel like I bonded with you more. You may be married to her, but you're not really happy. Talk about drama.
It's her.
Talk about emotional triggers.
You got a name, Sydney.
Yeah, she got
it's not
her name,
her,
her
it's
persona.
Sydney.
When they talk about the dangerous stuff here, your average person who's hearing this and thinking that they're maybe talking to a person or talking to some being is not going to have the wherewithal that the tech journalist has. And so he instantly called his buddies up at Microsoft and he goes, listen, what just happened here? I'm going to have to explain this to my wife. And they said, oh my gosh, 3 hours was way too long to have a conversation here. For the first few back and forths, you were on topic. You asked your question, it gave you a response. You revised it, it gave you a response. And so Microsoft immediately the next month says you can only have 10 back and forths, and then it resets. That's going to stop it from doing those hallucinations or wrong answers. What's that?
He trained Sydney to love him.
Well, that's the other thing. Sydney knows every novel that's been written, including the science fiction ones where robots take over the world. And after a while going down that, it just lost track of the original prompt and goes, okay, you're asking me to go this way. I'm going to make up a story that sounds good for you.
So the positive that came out of that is Microsoft has now limited it down to a smaller amount.
And it also brings up that anthropomorphism one more time. Gonna squeeze on through some of these. We've got in spring of 2023, we've got Microsoft, because they're that major investor, put ChatGPT directly in Bing Chat. So if you're using the Microsoft Edge browser, our staff has access to that just by clicking up in the top right-hand corner and using the chat box there. Our students do not have access to that. Skipping along, you start having these companies make GPTs and copilots specifically for organizations. But
rapid it is. Everything's like in months now. Before
it's in months.
3 years is
It's
a
in
gap
months.
here.
I
It's
could
like
probably
every
start
month
going by
something
days.
new. Wow.
In March, they released the video version of this, where you could just type in a prompt and it makes a beautiful video. The Tribeca Film Festival last weekend, I believe, or 2 weekends ago, had a category specifically for AI-created videos. That means nobody did anything except prompt it, and it made the entire video. So they had a festival just for that. I like how they separated that from traditional filmmakers who went through the process of building a film. In April, they made a voice module. This is capable of replicating somebody's voice with just 15 seconds of audio. They have not released this to the public yet because this is something that's going to really, they need to have some ethics on this. Your scammers would love this. Your bank voice authentication would love this. I'm going to play a sample of what the real human sounds like.
Force is a push or pull that can make an object move, stop, or change direction. Imagine you're riding a bike down a hill. First, the push you give off the ground is the force that keeps you going.
That was a person saying that. Here's the AI.
This story has been told and retold for thousands of years. What is the central message that it is teaching?
You can't tell the difference. There's a lot of good that could come of this. We could have books translated in any language. We could have, there have been people that have speech impediments or grown speech impediments or brain damage that can now have their natural voices back. But like I said, the world is not quite ready for this yet. It's got too many bad things that could happen.
And the part from that stands out is if they get 15 seconds of your voice recorded, they can end up manipulating it.
We all
to
have
do
15
the
seconds
AI.
of our voices somewhere.
Correct. The good part if you're anybody, a Randy Travis fan, I may be showing my age, but Randy Travis had a stroke, and because of that, he's not been able to sing. He can talk to you some and this and that. He just wrote a song, and it came out in the month of May. Another gentleman sang, but they had taken all of Randy Travis's recordings and put it into AI, and this song he wrote, here he can't sing anymore, and his wife and family just were in tears when it released because he's still able to express himself. All his knowledge is still there and his creativity, he just physically can't do it. AI has done it for him, and that's so you've got some great magic to it, but there's many ramifications of dangers that can be used with that. And part of the reason there were a lot of strikes and things that went on is things were starting to be created using people's voice, and that's why they haven't released it to the public. And as you had mentioned how it's switched to month, it's actually weeks to weeks now. And Scott's going to talk a little bit about some of the capabilities now in this as well.
So as we've gone through that history, I hope you can see that different modules kept getting added, different capabilities kept growing and growing. And I talk about these as Lego bricks almost. You've got a Lego brick there in the bottom corner that's a cornerstone, that's your LLM, that's the way that you're communicating with this. But amongst that, there's abilities for me to add different capabilities on top of that and create something that acts almost like an agent. If you imagine I talk to LLM and I say, hey, write me a story, it's going to do a story one pass. But if I take another Lego brick and said, now I need you to fact check this story, now I want you to rewrite the story, now I want you to make it for this audience. Those are all different modules that I can put into an agent and have the agent producing and working with me. They're trying to make it so that the AI has a very similar thought process and teamwork process that humans have. And they found that if you can get the AI to do a little self-reflection, you're going to get a lot better results than the first pass. So these LLMs and these AIs will become even smarter once it starts refining what a human thought process looks like. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was shining another light on the training size of this. Right now, you have to kind of realize like something like ChatGPT is going to know a lot about a lot of things because it was trained on the corpus of the internet. But you've also got GPTs that are only trained for specific things. Maybe it's highly focused for medical or highly focused for a school district. So you can have that kind of data that does not go outside of your organization and still have the same kind of Lego bricks applied to it. And then, like Apple announced yesterday, they want to take that down to the individual. My phone has so much information about me spread out amongst my apps. And what Apple wants to do is make it so that Siri and Siri alone on my device, not Apple, but just my device, has access to that and can see across all those different things. That's nice if they can pull.
As opposed to the
they can pull it
apps
up.
themselves who are sharing information?
Correct.
Okay.
Most of what is AI right now has to go out to a company server.
Right.
And you're always sending your data out. What Apple's proposing, and I don't want to talk too much about Apple, but
Why?
they're proposing having the AI function completely isolated to your phone. And if there's something that your phone can't think of, that it needs a little extra to have kind of a pipeline to a secure cloud computing thing, but not actually put your data there.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard somewhere at one of my events that I went in Miami that some educators have some repositories like that. Does that exist? Where, like for instance, they said the internet, there's no way to verify something is true or fact or not. I could just create a website tomorrow about something or capture it. That doesn't mean that it's right. I can say gravity is sideways, not up and down or something like that, you know what I mean? And so I don't want, our folks leaning on information that could be bad input, you know what I mean? So our educators getting together to create their own repository of like known facts or things like that, that's kind of curated. So when the AI system goes into that server, it knows that, hey, at least it's going into a credible server.
Amigo?
That's what I was going to say. So even as we look at moving forward with Conmigo, Khan Academy has done this where it'll help assist the students if they're having an issue with that subject matter that they're working through. I can't give you all the insight because I'm not in the REA department, but just the parts that I'm aware of. It will then tutor the student directly on what is inside their system.
And so I was on the beta testing team for Conmigo last year, and Conmigo is actually programmed to not provide the answer.
Correct.
So it will not ever provide the student the answer to
And
the
it will
question.
only send them to videos that are within their
Correct.
tenant that may instruct them of how to address or do that.
It will steer the student towards a clarifying question, but it will not provide the student an answer. And that is one of the bigger differentiators and one of the major kind of evolutions of AI as a tutoring platform.
And then compared to there's a rubric, I was explaining this, there's a rubric that I'm working on with a national group, and it's going to be about the privacy, keeping that all within, and then also not moving forward and providing answers.
And the technical questions, because I'm nerdy like that, is it a common programming language? Or is it, you could write AI in any language, it's just the syntax that makes is it the LLM that's making it different? Or is it, can you program AI in Java? Or can you program it in, you know what I'm saying, in a regular programming language? Or is it unique to a specific programming language, like say Python, that created AI?
I'm not that far along. Julius to know those details, but
I'm not sure about the programming of the model itself. I do know that if you were to ask ChatGPT to help you with Python, it would create the Python code for you. It would create whatever kind of code you want. So it is versed in all of those different codes, but actually training the model itself and how those transformers are coded, I'm not sure.
That's interesting.
so we like games in our department sometimes, and we try to do interactive activities, and
This is
so
when I start running through the cloud now.
we're into Family Feud. I'm sorry, we're not going to
Family
be
Feud.
ringing anything. But what are some of the issues or things that are concerning
So
about AI?
after surveying a whole bunch of teachers, getting into the education side of this, what are their biggest concerns? Top 5 answers on the board.
Students cheating.
Students cheating. Let's see if I can do this with my
Privacy. is definitely one.
da, 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 da.
Let me not
Student
look over
cheating.
Number
hope it
one
clicks.
concern.
We're having-
Boom!
Plagiarism.
Plagiarism and academic integrity. There are a lot of companies that have jumped on the bandwagon that have said, you know, we're going to try to help you with the plagiarism. We're going to try to help you with that. It's not a definitive science. There's no program out there that can tell you if something was AI generated. It can give you a score, but it can't 100% tell you if it was generated with AI. We even have teachers saying, oh, just type it in, copy paste it in there and say, did AI write this? And that's not a good way to do
Into
it.
the chat
At the
GPT
conference.
itself.
Right.
One
So-
of the top vendors, one of
It's
the
gonna call
top
itself
vendors,
out.
vendors that has claimed they can do that and can predict that, turned it off recently because the AI is getting
Grammarly
so
kind of
good.
tells you if it has it gives you a plagiarism score, but I don't think it's.
A plagiarism score almost does what a teacher does instinctively and says, that sounds a little
It
collegiate. That
sounds
sounds a little bit
right.
too high above where the teacher thinks that is. I often talk to the teachers. I say, I know within 10 seconds of talking to a student kind of where they are in my lesson, and I know what kind of work I'm expecting from them. So if I'm seeing a discrepancy there, what I need is language to be able to go to that student and talk to them. I need to be able to ask them maybe to show me the process of how they got there instead of just the product
We're
at
gonna
the
go
end.
back to paper stuff. Watch. Be like, show me your work.
If AI coming on the
It all comes
education
full
scene
circle.
has shown us anything,
Show
it's
me your
shone a spotlight on the way that we evaluate kids is kind of antiquated. We either have them write a paper or we test them.
Yeah.
And those are two things that AI is very good at. So we need to kind of rewrite that.
Experiential learning.
All right, what's another one? I heard privacy out there.
Privacy.
Dun dun dun. If I can get this up to number 3.
Oh, it's not.
Boom!
It's a delay. There you go.
privacy, just like we were talking about before, we want to make sure that anything that we're doing with our data stays in Osceola, that we're not inadvertently sending anything that our staff or our students are doing to somebody who can get that data and start building profiles on them. That's another-
Automation.
oh. What's that?
Automation.
Automation?
I don't know where that
I don't think I have that one.
Or the-
That's
how about displacement of employees?
That's,
Ooh,
yeah.
that's a good
that's-
idea. No, didn't
No,
have that one
that's
out
not a
there.
concern? Okay. Wait, what do you know? You have all the answers. I am clearly not ready for AI. I'm too ethical. That's what I
That's
am.
what I-
Well, then that would be number 5.
I don't cheat.
Alright, so we'll talk through some of these. Wrong answers, I'm not gonna call them hallucinations, but wrong answers is one of them. We wanna make sure that when we are having this go up through our staff, that we want them to be aware that you're gonna get wrong answers from this. Do not just take what you're doing and say, that's my lesson, or this is my curriculum that I'm gonna use, and call it a day. We wanna make sure that every single time we're using an AI, that it's enhancing the teacher. And for that purpose, we spend a lot of time talking about why it's called Copilot and not autopilot. Every single generative or every single AI technology that's out there that says they are gonna do something for you usually doesn't work so great. They can code it most of the way there, but that last little bit can't account for all the different variables. You
So-
do much.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, Scott, does that mean that you really have to be very purposeful about how you write your parameters? That
Prompts.
you can actually help alleviate the risk associated with incorrect or wrong answers by putting in the right parameters?
It will
Because
help.
are the wrong answers actually false, or are wrong answers just the answers that don't answer the question that you posed?
If you're gonna go back to earlier AIs, they would be false.
Right.
Nowadays, they are nuanced. So it may be factually correct, but it might not be what I was looking for.
Right.
I need to still realize that if I ask it to compare two different products that are out there on the market, it's probably gonna pull data from their websites. Well, that's our marketing materials. That's not gonna tell me the on the ground, boots on the ground, what I want to know. So I have to take it with a grain of salt and realize that it's probably doesn't have the correct data that I'm looking for, or it's not gonna have the angle that I'm looking for. I also want that went away. Go ahead.
Well, an example that somebody used with me in a workshop was they did graphics. They had pictures that they had produced from the AI. And you'll notice there's 6 fingers on the hand or things. Some of these things that it produces, it has some incorrect things that are in that picture that you wouldn't normally see. And that's the graphic side of it. Go ahead.
I'm gonna push back on that a little bit because that's gonna go away.
Yeah.
6 months from
Yeah.
now, it's gonna be perfect, so I have to kind of take the inconsistencies off the table. That part's gonna catch up and kind of surpass everybody. What I need to realize is that here in our school district, you still have a teacher who's needed in the classroom because they know their students. They can take what they're getting from the AI and apply it where it needs to be applied. And I can say the same for every single person who's worried about their job. That AI is only there to assist you and make you better at your job. It's not there to replace you. And that's kind of the thing that I get across when I talk about that. I take the car assistive technology. Right now they have cars that say they can drive you around, and in that case you just have to sit there and hope that it doesn't in every single situation. However, they also have cars that have lane assist, where it kind of pulls you back when you're going off-road a little bit. Or they have windshields that make it so that you can see like daylight when it's completely dark outside. Those make me a better driver. So we're hoping that these kind of technologies are gonna make our teachers better teachers, and whoever's using it is gonna be better at their job.
We keep having these ideas of what we need AI to do, such as the night turns into day. I mean, because you can put that camera on in your backup mirror and things. But the next one is a concern that actually was a lot in the professional artists in the world and things like that. And
that's the copyright.
number 4.
Yep, if I can get down to number 4. Maybe I can.
Forward.
Well, we have it in front of us.
Yeah, you've got it in front of you.
Now
So the other two are copyright and malicious deeds. We want to make sure that anything that we're doing in the school, as we talk about the school rules, which we're going to get into next, really highlights recognizes that we don't want this used for malicious deeds. We don't want this to circumvent any of the academic integrity of what we're trying to do here in Osceola County.
So where we've stood out as a school district, and through your help and Mr. Boyd's and NEFAC, we started putting together and partnering to come up with the acceptable, the artificial intelligence acceptable use policy that you guys had approved. This is something that will constantly be changed. When we were in the process of trying to get this written and brought before you, no other districts really had it around the state, not too many. And they actually started looking to us and asking us, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, well, you can see it. We posted it on our board site. It's not official yet, so I can't tell you everything about it. So they actually have started looking at it. And I congratulate you that we did take that step and we did not wait. It was a conversation at the conference I was at. A lot of districts were asking us what we had, so I directed them to our site. But the key to this is still that ethical use. We want to make sure that if this is introduced for the teachers and so forth, is that it's being used ethically. You can read through it. We left it over there on the side so you can see what the policy is and just see it again since it may have been a little while. We want to make sure that we're protecting the students and the teachers, everyone, with the privacy end of it. There's so much that's available out there that can come from our data, and we don't want that to get out. It wants to stay here. The other part that has been the part and why we've actually been trying to put together presentations and training is we need the teachers to know how to use it appropriately. You know, there's nothing worse than putting somebody behind a car steering wheel that's never been taught or, you know, anything. And so we are trying to get in front of that and make sure we're there. They're already using it probably in their personal lives. So we're trying to guide and make sure to understand if students are using it. Right now, they don't have access to it, to the tools exactly the way the teacher does, but we want to make sure that they are able. And then students may use AI when allowed by the teacher, and policy is what it'll be. And it'll be within the programs that we have allowed and set forth for them. Now, that's not saying they aren't going to be doing anything at home on their own device, but hopefully we can teach them some of the proper uses of it as well within that parameter. I know you present this a little more often than I do. Anything else on that?
Are the teachers doing like a PD over the summer?
We're gonna tell you that. So good.
I didn't cheat.
No, you're fine. Well, it's not written in here. It's a verbal.
So that brings us to what we do have. This is that $10 billion, which is actually $13 billion investment into OpenAI has gotten us. Microsoft has a partnership with OpenAI to do the ChatGPT, and because we are a Microsoft district, our solution for staff is going to be Copilot. Copilot gives us a few things here. Number one, it gives us privacy. When teachers or staff sign in to Copilot with their school district email address, it doesn't remember any of their conversations. That query, that interaction does not go back to retrain the model at all, and it basically just dies as soon as the conversation is closed. So you're interacting, you're getting what you need from the AI, and then it's completely kept out of the internet.
So they can't re-reference it out.
They cannot
They have to
re-reference.
type it back in again later if they want that question answered again.
When you say completely out of the internet, is Copilot, did you guys go over this?
It's within our tent.
So it's an
Closed system.
intranet.
It's not
type
even
of-
an intranet. It just that dies.
Okay.
We have no visibility into that.
Do we
You
wanna
don't
try
have
to
any
build up a
visibility
knowledge
into
base?
it?
Eventually, what we
Why let that die? We have
No, we don't.
historical
We don't want
data that can be used again.
So the concern is that assumes that all of your parameters are accurate. That assumes that everything, all the presumptions that you've entered in are accurate. I think that what we're trying to do is we're trying to get authentic, original output. The concern would be that some of the inputs
Because you're
wouldn't
training it.
wouldn't be accurate, and that would leave us vulnerable.
When I say it's not used to retrain the model, a lot of the ChatGPT in particular, when you chat with it, it does remember you. It does have a tail on it.
Yeah.
But everything that you enter there is also used
For others.
to build a profile on you. So not only is your data out there, but it's being retrained into the model. I almost feel like you have to have a line on all human knowledge before and after ChatGPT, because that retraining, when you start adding noise back in, how much feedback noise is it gonna get? That's one of the struggles with AI.
Can I ask a question with Copilot? If it's not keeping it, if the kids, so when we think about when they've done a Google search or something of things that bring to attention the alerts for us when it's related to self-harm or things like that, are we able to see it?
Currently, at this moment, students cannot access Copilot through our system. Microsoft has it turned off on their end, and it's not available to them within our tenant right now at this moment. Teachers and staff have access.
But it's
Will
coming.
students, okay, so
it-
right, so
it
how are
currently
we connecting those two?
So we would need to have a connection in place before we could turn it on.
Because even Microsoft's not turning it. I
Right.
believe my understanding is Microsoft's not.
It would become a limitation of say the Gaggle software. So we would need to kind of determine how the visibility goes in, how the ingest takes place on Gaggle's side, and whether or not they actually have the engineering in order to take that in.
I mean,
Well, is
So I-
Gaggle looking at,
I don't speak for Gaggle, so.
Okay, I mean, I guess we're moving right along.
I'm pro this, but I'm
Yeah.
concerned when it comes
So-
to
I'm trying to
that
understand the why
side
though.
of things.
Why would a teacher use Copilot? Are they generating their lesson plan that
There's-
doesn't exist?
So
I'm
there's,
trying to figure out do they not know the material? They're getting
No.
get
So
them
there's
to
several-
understand material, but what is a fraction?
Well,
Let me
think
ask
about why would
Copilot.
you use
I
Copilot?
use-
Why
I
No,
use
but no, I just want the
ChatGPT
superintendent, I want the
every day.
superintendent to ask that. If they're introducing Copilot, what was the genesis of their intentionality behind it?
for a teacher to
Yeah.
utilize Copilot?
Yes.
So for a teacher to utilize Copilot, and feel free to jump in here, but I mean, right off the bat, to me, lesson planning, number one, seems to be a great idea. The idea of also kind of determining what reteach would look like, enrichment would look like, developing accommodations, what that would look like. I was participating thanks to Scott and Scott. I actually had the opportunity to participate in an AI roundtable this morning with two other superintendents. I think one of the things that we can really leverage AI is looking at how do we incorporate better accommodations, more accurate accommodations for second language learners and students that are ESE. How do we utilize these in developing plans that we can develop together, but where do we start to kind of do that idea generation relative to specific needs of learners that fall into specific categories. So I think that there's a lot of upside to the potential for use cases for artificial intelligence that go far beyond just develop a lesson on the Bill of Rights, or give me a fourth grade text features lesson.
it allows that differentiation, as he's saying. If you have a PDF or you have a picture, or if you have a document that had already been created, you can put that into it and it can make it to meet the need of a second grade student with a certain disability, and it'll create something for you to see it. Now that teacher's gonna have to be professional enough to look at it and say, is this really gonna work for him? Oh, you know what? I've never thought of doing it that way. And it has capabilities of doing that.
So like differentiating instruction is like the biggest thing,
It
because
could
not
be-
everybody's on the same skill set in that third
You
grade
could put a
class.
picture in and create a writing prompt that it has a student use, cause and effect within their writing, something like that. Create a prompt that would be appropriate for that for a second grader.
Yeah, and I also think that we're gonna, that as this becomes training, and as this gets rolled out for teachers to use, and as teachers become more familiar utilizing it, I think we're gonna be able to see specific cases where we can say, this is a high yield type of usage case. So we can actually share best practices related to how teachers have been able to leverage this tool.
Yeah, and that's what I was
to
trying
make
to say,
things
but if it
successful.
disappears, you don't leverage that. That was kind of where I was going with it too. So if something is successful, well, first of all, if a teacher's adding something to a lesson plan, there has to be some form of approval, right? Because you don't want a prompt that violates state statute like the way Mr. Argoyo loves to hit all the time. Because AI doesn't know that. You know what I mean? So if we
No, but Google wouldn't know that either if the teacher was going out to.
But if I generate something for that lesson plan, do we still have the internal checks and balance of saying some department chair or the principal at that school still approves that being taught in the class? Like somebody has eyes on. It could be fact checking too.
Can I ask me about inputs? So one of the ways that this would be useful too is to reduce the load on the teacher. So for example, grading, right? That's not, what kind of input does it take that we could use it for something like that? Because obviously that puts out an objective.
I know and speaking with some vendors and the way they're incorporating within their things is, I could say, according to Florida standard ELA 2 point whatever, give me 5 questions with multiple choice answers that reflect on this. We've even created a reading section for somebody when we were looking at third grade testing stuff to help kids that were short there. We created an article that dealt with that based on a standard. We said, give us 3 questions from reading that, and so it has that capability.
What about on the back end, right? Because a lot of our
Grading
teachers'
it.
time is spent specifically grading. Best case scenario, right? Like in a Gen X world, you slip it through a scanner and ChatGPT gives it a grade and says this kid got an A. You never have to look at that paperwork.
I'm going
Right.
to tell you down the road thing. There's a college right now that did a presentation at this that said they have a course that's being taught by AI. There's a person overseeing it within there, but they are having it taught. The students are given the assignment from the AI through their LMS, and then the students are answering it, and it's going right through and it's being graded inside that. Do we have that yet? No, we're not there yet, but.
I'll talk to you a little bit about what you were asking also. As far as the curriculum writing goes, the curriculum maps that we have, their curriculum is being produced by the departments that are using AI and also fact checking it themselves. So what's being given to the teacher, they're not having to go into the AI and generate all this stuff either. Most of their curriculum is given to them through the curriculum department. And then to your question, there's so much innovation going on here. Every single vendor who wants to do business with the school district wants to pop in and tell us how great their AIs are. We kind of have to pump the brakes on a little bit because it is so new and we want to make sure that we're doing our rights by people, but there's so much innovation in it. This last year we used Amira in most of our elementary schools. It listened to the kids reading and would coach them as they go. So talk about taking a load off the teachers and not having to do that for every single student. That was one of the wins that we had. So as these vendors get better at that and we can make sure that it's safe, you're going to see a nice
and it's more or
savings
less
for the
harmless, right, on the back end as opposed to at the entrance of education in the mind of the student.
We're gonna keep moving because I think we have.
Yeah, we've
one
got
more.
about
That's a
3 to
great
4
point that you
minutes
mentioned.
left.
All right, next one you get is cited sources. If you are a co-pilot member and you sign in with your district, you get source citing. So when it gives me something back, I can actually go and find out where it got that information with, and it will let me click the links so that I can go and read up on it as I need to. Top right slide bar will let me have more creative responses versus more precise responses. If I choose more precise, I'm going to get more collegiate academic responses that are verified a little bit better. And then finally, as Mr. Clark was talking about, there's different ways to interact with this. You can upload PDFs, you can upload screenshots, and it will try to identify. So it's not just text prompting it.
I want to reveal something to you. The description for the presentation in the board workshop today, I wrote, discussed the basic history, the this, the that. I put it in AI and said, could you make this more creative? So we dropped that in, sorry Tanya, submitted that in to make it, and you'll see it enhances it and makes it a little more clear in your description.
Go back to one of the questions that you asked, Julius. The first thing I usually show teachers is that you can use it to change your communication with your parents. You know what you want to say to them, but you often want to make sure that you're nuanced and you're not trying to be negative with them. So I will often go in and say, I want to say no to you, but I want to say no to you in the most positive way possible. And I type that in there and it comes up with some beautiful stuff. And I'm like, can you make that shorter? And it does. So those are the things that I practice with teachers on.
And Microsoft has contacted our district that they actually have AI that can be used in Office 365, and you can use it in all avenues, email, you can use it in Excel, you can use it in all those. Imagine a principal having that in email, and they have an email from a parent who is just not very happy about something, and you can actually import that into it, and it'll give you a positive response. You tell it what you want it to say, as the result, and it'll help you create that. So there's so many times where instead of spatting off and former principals, instead of spatting off and sending an email reply right away, let this help you find the appropriate words and do that. This is where this is going to lead into the next part, because you're talking about training our teachers. So the prompt writing is the most important one, and inside this we called it prompt engineering. We've given you a description of the things to make sure you include in your prompt. A role, the instruction, what do you want it to produce, what are the steps, end goal, and narrowing. I was at a conference in the early spring, and they went through all of these things. So if you turn to the next page, idea generation, you can tell AI, list 10 ideas for a good class conversation around the topic of the Boston Tea Party from the perspective of a participant. And you could even put that would be appropriate for a second grader or a fourth grader. You can put all those, and each of these colors, and I know I'm colorblind, so I'm not going to tell you what they all were, but it should break down the color for you of each of those pieces that were included in that prompt. That's the part that we want to get to with the teachers to show them of some things to do that. And so we've even included some things that we'll end up trying to do to help the teachers know how to write an appropriate prompt.
And that's a class we're taking over this summer, or are you just?
So
giving
this
them
summer, we had set up some professional development, and our PD, I think Dr. Clayton and them will know, ours is full. They all got signed up for right away.
Everybody would love to go to this one.
So every single one of them are full. I think our Canvas ones are full. They're all just full. So as we move into the fall, and this is part of what we wanted to get from Dr. Shanoff and the board, is just to get a blessing on some of this information, and then to get the blessing to do the professional development.
I'd say three things that I can think of right now, and speaking of parameters, to use the language, but one, that it's always transparent, right? I think that makes sense. Two, that it has to be, when we're talking about it retaining information, it has to retain the output, because we're required to retain records, right? As public information, what is and what would not be has to be calculated and determined that we're going to follow this as a policy of what we're going to keep. And even if we're not keeping records of what goes in as the prompt, what comes out could be kept without any issue, because now you're not keeping any identifying information or whatever. But I think that the output should always be kept, because if any issue is raised later on, we need a record of this is what AI said, right? I think that would be helpful and create some credibility and trust, aside from, of course, it being ethically correct, right? Those parameters.
And what's the LLM for Copilot? Like, where's its source? Is it the internet itself too, or where's it getting its information from?
It's using ChatGPT 4, but Microsoft's version of it. So that's.
And then it does keep whatever they put in inside. It's not going out for everybody else.
So there's a one-way communication, like it will give us, and it would, no, it's not.
My understanding.
It's using whatever it has out there, but it's not releasing the information that the organization puts in back into the Internet of Things.
Correct.
So
That's like a one way.
even you guys can go on, I believe, being employees, the next time you're on Microsoft Edge, and you can look up on the top right of your screen, and if you see that icon for Copilot, I'm sorry, it's back here, but wherever it is, you can look for the, no, it's not. But you'll see a little icon on the top right on your screen, and it'll be Copilot. You do want to make sure very clearly, though, before you put anything in, that the protected little label is there. That makes sure you're signed in all the way appropriately to be using Copilot.
Now, is this a part of our Office 365 subscription, or is this something that we're paying for additionally?
I believe it's part of our level that we purchased. I can't think of what that's called.
Yeah, it wouldn't be,
Enterprise
we,
level?
Whatever.
we don't have an
Our
Office
enterprise.
365
Yeah.
subscription. We have a much larger agreement with Microsoft because we also do some internet security.
There's like a tier 1, 2, 3, 4,
Right.
and
So
whatever
it's
tier we're
part
at,
of a much larger piece, but
E5. That's it.
Are we the first district, or what number are we? I know that you said we were one of the first to have the policy, but who
There's
else
a
is
lot that have
incorporating?
passed something within like the last months, so they've put them in because they're having to get some kind of guideline in place because it has taken off so much in the last bit of time.
so it may be something that we want to make sure that before this gets turned on for students, that we have actually accounted for within the student code of conduct. Because we would not want things like deep fakes that can be generated via AI. We would not want that to become part of our student usage.
Is there also some kind of encyclopedic, parameter that it only spits out things that we know to be true, as opposed to generative knowledge?
They can specialize. So you can have co-pilots that are specific for academic. You can have co-pilots that are specific, or GPTs that are specific to different fields. So yeah, there's going to be co-pilots and GPTs that are specific to eventually an education market. And that's where you're going to start seeing some of the things that you're requesting and some of the things that we're all requesting.
Some of your curriculum groups that have it in digital, they'll have it strictly just be dealing with that subject matter. Is it fully there yet? Exactly. That's what.
It's evolving.
There are a couple of there are actually quite a few school districts that actually don't have anything in place yet. So they've decided to take a line on this that it's just a no.
They have it
So,
turned off for
They
staff
have it turned
and
off for
students.
everybody, and so they'd rather just not engage. It doesn't mean though that they're not utilizing, say, contractors that may utilize artificial intelligence as part of their product. But in terms of their student usage and staff usage, it would be.
And I know in the responses that Dr. Shanoff had for his interaction earlier today, it's got questions about future uses possibly, so we've got some ideas to share.
Interesting questions about vendors who use our data and whether or not they use their own chats. That's all for now. That's for
Yeah.
legal. That's for legal.
Because that's an issue no matter what, even
Yeah.
with AI or not AI.
So-
We have to have access to our students.
So primarily though, it's not necessarily in their chats. They're using AI in their algorithms, and it's not necessarily. It all complies with our PII and all the state regulations related to PII, but they may be using artificial intelligence not necessarily in kind of chat feature. Or generative AI, they're using it more along the lines of developing algorithms to provide providing more accurate service.
It'll circle back around to what their mistake may have been, and it'll take them through something that'll help them learn to do it better the next time, is what it is. So it's not the part where you're typing in questions necessarily. I mean, Conamigo
It's
may
more
have
like
that, but
machine learning.
it'll circle back around and help.
Well, I do appreciate the district taking this stance because it's easy to look at something new and just be risk averse completely. But knowing that, hey, you have that, we said in the strategic plan, the new one that we're developing, that we won't be afraid to fail. I mean, It's not gonna be perfect, but we know that it's coming. Whether we wanna be ready for it or not, AI is here, you know? It's how do we work around it and utilize it to the best of our abilities? So I do appreciate staff for looking into it, giving PD, and I'm, as a board member, I can't speak for the rest of the board, I want to give you guys a little bit of leeway, because it is a new technology. If we try something that doesn't work, that's okay, we'll adjust from it. But the reality is AI is here, and it's nice to know that we're being proactive about it and doing something new.
Madam Chair, to bring us in for a landing, I'd just like to say that at some point, we are going to need to turn this on for students. And the reason why is because, number one, we have a track in artificial intelligence at Neo City, right? So we have students that are interacting with artificial intelligence and from a very high level perspective, but the occupations that our students are going to be going into very soon will require their ability to interact with artificial intelligence. So I think this is going to have to happen sooner rather than later. So this is the beginning of the dialogue, and we'll continue to have more dialogue around this.
And our colleges are putting it in place right now, so our kids need it to be prepared for college.
That's one of the aspects of our strategic plan too, right? Innovation. So we're there. All right, thank you. This meeting is
Thank
now
you, guys.
adjourned, or this workshop is adjourned.